This is the Toto Drake II toilet, introduced around the 2010s and is still made to this very day. I'd figured it'd be a good time to start reviewing some cyclone or vortex flushing toilets, and I figured we'd start with the company that started this trend. For the most part, Toto. These are most known for the Ultramax IIs back in the 2000s, which is virtually this but one piece. The Drake II is a two-piece version. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell you guys now that I think the regular Drake sucks. It's probably one of the most overrated toilets I've ever seen. It's virtually the same garbage as any color class 5 out there. Sure, there may be some differences or upgrades or downgrades between the two, but it's virtually the same crap. But the Drake 2 is at least interesting. Is it any better? Well, let's take a look at it. Overall design-wise, I'm not the biggest fan of it. It just looks weird. Like, it doesn't look super ugly, but it looks weird. I don't know how to feel about this overall design. You can tell it's like a fake one-piece design, like the Ultramax II, which is actually a one-piece toilet, but this is obviously two-piece. I think the design could be a little bit better, honestly. The trapway opening is just the Drake again, with a siphon jet right here, and two Vortex Jets, one right here and one right here. Most companies go for mostly one Vortex Jet, but this one goes for two. The tank parts for the most part are very simple. You've got a standard handle, which has been replaced with a generic one for whatever reason. Usually it would have a front-facing corner handle like you would see on a Toto Drake, a Toto fill valve, and a 3-inch flapper. Now, of course, my biggest problem is the flapper. It stays open very shortly and doesn't offer a very good flush. And something else I've noticed is that the Toto fill valve sometimes underfills. But you'll see the flapper problem right here. Of course, that's typical for most toilets though, and I really hate that problem with flappers. Let's do some flushes. Let's first do a press and release. The flush kind of sucks. It's way too short on a press and release. Now let's hold the handle down. For the most part, the flush is alright, but I wish it was a little bit longer. On a press and release flush, the pulling and siphon power is unsurprisingly terrible. The flush is just way too short, and the choppy siphon doesn't help out either. On an extended flush, it's just meh. If the flush was a little bit longer and the siphon wasn't so choppy, I definitely think it would be a little bit better, but as it is, it's just meh. Still better than the regular Drake though, but not by too much. On a press and release flush, the performance is very crappy. Then again, the regular Drake is not known for performing that great, so since they copied the trapway opening and passages over from the Drake, that should not be very shocking. On an extended flush, the performance is still just meh. I definitely think the performance is definitely the weakest part, but I've definitely seen worse performances, but still, compared to the Drake, it's a slight bit better, but not by too much. It's still just meh. Now let's have a look at bowl rinse. Let's first do a press and release. Honestly, I think it's terrible. The flush is just way too short and the coverage is not very long. Now let's hold the handle down. Honestly, the bowl rinse itself is just meh. I definitely think the two jets definitely help out, but I definitely think the biggest problem is getting rid of harder stains. Since the coverage and the appliance is not the greatest, I definitely think harder stains would be harder to get off. But I do appreciate the effort of including two jets compared to one like most other companies do. But overall, the bowl rinse is just meh. Here's another angle. And that is the Toto Drake II toilet. While definitely improvement compared to the original Drake, it's still just a meh toilet at the end of the day. If they improve some of the qualities about this toilet, as well as extending the fill valve up a little bit to include more water, I could definitely see some slight value in this toilet. But as it is, it's just meh. But let's put this toilet into the grading scale. Let's grade it. The overall design of the Drake II is very strange in a very interesting way. At first glances, it looks pretty basic and modern, but the tank just looks kind of weird. Well, at least personally to me. Outside of that, I don't really have much else to say about it. It's a 5. The tank parts are very simplistic for a Toto like this, but I don't like the flapper at all. It just closes way, and I mean way too early, meaning you have to hold down the handle in order to get the proper flush. And I don't like that, and I never will. I will say I wish the fill valve was a little bit more higher to accommodate for more water, but outside of that, overall though, I don't really care for these parts, especially the flapper. So that gets it a 4. I think outside the inconsistent performances that this thing might have, I think the quality control overall isn't too bad. I guess when you simplify the ball enough to be operated by 2 Vortex Jets with no rim jets at all, and that everything seems to work perfectly well, you don't really have much to complain about the quality control. And keep in mind Toto doesn't have the greatest quality control most of the time, so this being perfectly fine is a nice treat. I give it a 7. The trackway passages are almost identical to the Toto Drake, so I don't really have much to say about it. It's very simplistic. It gets a 5. On a press and release, the flush sucks. The flush is just abnormally short and it barely does anything, so it gets a 2. On an extended flush, the flush is alright. It's about as good as you'll get for a Vortex toilet like this. And I do like the dual Vortex Jets. At most, this toilet gets a 6. The pulling and siphon power sucks on a press and release. This thing is slightly worse off considering that the pulling factor is barely there. Not to mention that the siphon is very choppy, so it's an easy 2. On an extended flush, I definitely think it's still pretty meh. The one thing I just don't like is the choppy siphon. It just screams possible regurgitation, and I don't like that. If I don't like that on other Drakes or any other Kohler Class 5 toilets, I don't like it on this toilet either. At most, the pulling and siphon is a 5. The performance on the press and release is quite crappy. No one should really be surprised about that. Then again, the Drakes are never known for being great performers. If you're buying a Drake for great performance, you're going to be severely let down, no matter which one you buy. On the lower end score, it's a 3. On an extended flush, I definitely think the performance is pretty meh. Again, the performances on Drakes are generally not that great, so that's not super surprising. Compared to the original Drake, I definitely think that the performance is a little bit better. But that isn't really saying much considering at most it's a 5. The ball runs on the press and release is terrible. It's way too short and barely does anything. It's an easy 2. Now, on an extended flush, I definitely think it's a little bit better, but I definitely think it isn't great either. There is a lot of nuance to the ball runs of Vortex toilets. Sure, it can cover the rim pretty well, but the application really isn't the greatest. The weird thing is that the rinse is a little bit more questionable, especially towards the middle section. Not to mention that harder stains might be harder to get off from the ball. Overall, ball rinse with Vortex Jets is pretty mixed. I give it a 5. So going on the lower end scale, the survivability is very low. I mean, who's shocked? It's a 3. On the higher end scale, the survivability is okay. I give it a 6. Now let's talk about the overall value of this toilet and see if it's worth buying today. On the lower end scale, yeah, it's pretty horrible. Then again, are you surprised? The flush is just way too short to do anything, way too short to flush out properly, way too short to perform, way too short to rinse. You'll have a horrible time pressing and releasing all the time, especially with the stupid water-saving flapper. The lower end scale gets a 2. But how about if you properly use this thing in the proper way? I definitely think that this toilet is quite interesting. But overall, everything ends up being pretty middle of the road. Compared to the original Drake, some things are barely upgraded. The pulling and siphon power as well as the performance is mostly the same, but a little bit better. Sure, the ball runs is a little bit better compared to the original Drake, but it's still Vortex Jets and are pretty hit or miss. And yes, objectively the only thing that's upgraded is the flush. But it's about the best you can get for a Vortex toilet like this. Compared to the original Drake, I definitely think this toilet is a lot better, don't get me wrong. But overall as a toilet, it's just pretty which is kind of disappointing considering that this thing had some great potential, but yet again, it's just a Drake, but with Vortex Jets. Definitely better than the original Drake, but definitely has some things holding it back from its full potential. So here's the question, should you buy this toilet? Overall, compared to everything else, not really. But if you're going exclusively modern or exclusively Toto, I don't know why you would do that, then yeah, I definitely would recommend buying this toilet. But don't expect the most amazing thing out of this product. Sure, it's definitely serviceable and gets the job done, but it's just pretty middle of the road overall. Which is kind of a shame considering that I wanted more from this toilet, but I guess this is the modern era. Man, it's definitely better than most of the modern dumpster fires that are made to this day, so I guess there's that. It's sad to say, but welcome to the modern world. Overall, on a higher end scale, the value is a 5. Now let's take a look at the final scores of the Toto Drake II toilet. On the low end scale, the final score is a 35 out of 100. However, on the higher end scale, it's a 53 out of 100. You know, I was expecting a little bit more from this toilet, but I guess being serviceable at best is better than nothing. Sure, it's quite interesting, but I expected a little bit more from this toilet. But then again, it's definitely one of the better Toto products. But considering I hate most of Toto's products, is that really saying a lot though?